Hey there, Ryan Kingslien here. Now, I want to ask you a question. Do you use frustration as a creative process? Let me explain that. Because I discovered that I was doing this. I was literally doing this, and it was causing me some serious trouble. And so I want to talk a little bit about that and some of the ways in which I think that this can be a good thing and how we can get out of it. But I discovered I was using frustration as a process, as a creation tool. I would get busy with my day job, my business, the family, like all these things that were outside of my art until I would just get frustrated. And the frustration would build, and it would build, and I was like, I just got to do something else, I got to do something else. And it would build until it became this anxiety that I could literally feel inside my body, and it would propel me into the studio and push me past all the barriers and just get me in there, and I'd be creating and working until that died down, and then I'd go back over here and I'd start to focus on my day job and all these other responsibilities until that would build and build and build until it shot me into the studio where I would work until I lost my momentum, until the energy kind of dissipated, and then I would come back over here. So has that ever happened to you? Does that sound at all familiar? If it does, some people call this a crazy eight. The idea is that we get stuck in this feedback loop where we do one thing until we hit a threshold, and we jump over here and we start doing this other thing until we hit a threshold. Wouldn't it be awesome if it could just be, instead of this crazy eight, it could just be a cycle where we were in our day job and we were creating and everything was flowing at the same time? But there's a reason why that doesn't happen. And until we fix that reason, we will always have that crazy eight. In my case, the reason it was happening is because there were certain rules I had. There were certain expectations I had out of myself, and I had to do this. I had to draw at this level before I would let myself paint what I wanted. I had to sculpt at this level. I had to have this skill or that skill. I had to have master color theory. I had to master all these things. So it built a wall over time. And that wall would keep me over here in all this day job stuff. I'd be learning my skills, I'd be working on my job, and I would be, taking care of family, all these things, until the frustration would just literally break through the wall and put me over in the studio. And I would stay in the studio, happy, until I remembered all of the rules that made the wall. And then as I remembered those rules, I would lose my energy, and I would slowly have to jump over and say, okay, well, you're right. And then when I said, okay, you're right, I need to master color theory, boom, I was on the other side of that wall. And I was over there focusing on my day job, my responsibilities, the business, and all these things, and I wasn't creating. Because I had accepted that wall was there and that was true. In order for us to break the cycle, we have to realize that these are just rules. And they're what I like to call threshold rules or threshold definitions. So think about this for a second. What do I have to do to be a painter? I'm a painter. I paint, right? I'm also classically trained or traditionally trained, and so there's some baggage that I've got there. I'm also trained in the new media, so I got some baggage over there, but I'm a painter. So what is my definition of painting? What is painting? What must I do or be to be a painter? So chances are, if I was to ask you that question, you might have a series of rules like I had. I have to be able to draw well. I have to totally understand anatomy. I have to master anatomy. I have to have complete command of composition, right? Those are all thresholds. They're all goals. They're things that I would really like to do. But what I found myself happening was I'd say, okay, this is really good. I want to be able to do this. And you know what? I'm not an artist until I can do that. That gap took away all the momentum. I'm not going to create my own work until I've mastered composition. How do you master composition without having some of your own passion and enthusiasm? How do you master anything? Anybody who's mastered anything knows that they really haven't mastered it. You just get to a different hill, and then you get to another hill, and then you get to another hill, and you see farther. You're on the top of Mount Everest. Well, what's next? Mars. Mars is what's next. What happens after Mars? Colonization of Mars. What happens after that? A Hilton on Mars. What happens after that? A Hilton in orbit around Mars that's a way station for Pluto, where everybody can go and have their Arctic vacation. That's where. And it keeps going. That's the problem with skill. It never ends. It's always farther to go. So if we build this wall and then we say, I am not an artist until I've got here, then we have divorced ourselves from a really significant part of our joy, our life, our vitality, our love. And that creates these two spheres that we cycle back and forth. And the only thing that gets us past that, or has to date, has been frustration. Frustration and anxiety, which, if you've gone through that, you know can be quite difficult on your loved ones. It can be quite difficult on your relationships. And now I have kids, so am I going to start yelling at my kids because I'm frustrated and anxious and I just really need to go study and go into the studio, sorry? Or do I find a way to collapse this, or another way to leapfrog that? So for me, I had to leapfrog that. I didn't have the best childhood, and I was not willing to let my kids have anything but the best. And by best, I don't mean like the best toys. I mean just the most love that I can give those monkeys. So for me, I needed something different. Frustration was not going to work for the level of relationships I wanted. And that's when I discovered something else. For me, it was playfulness, which has this element of love in it, right? So all these things that are great in life, they all have this element of love. But the actual action was playfulness. Before, frustration would get me over here, and then now playfulness gets me over here. When I want to go play, I get into the studio. And I don't mean play like, we think kids play. I mean play like kids actually play, where they're little PhD candidates doing all kinds of things, testing and experimenting and moving and laughing and jumping and pushing their body and doing all kinds of stuff. Play in the studio. That gets me over, and that became the bridge. So I can walk through the door and be with my family, and then I can walk back through this door and I can be in the studio and playing without the anxiousness and the anxiety, because it's all just play, right? Think about it like sports. Sure, there's competition, there's competitiveness, but what do you say when somebody's playing basketball or tennis? They play tennis, they play basketball. You play sports, but yet we suffer art? We suffer art? Is that quite right? Google psychology of sports. What do you find? Lots of like peak performance, things like that. Google psychology of art. You have art therapy and Vincent van Gogh's photo with his ear cut, or painting with it, self-portrait with his ear cut or bandaged, right? That's not right in my book. That's not right. We need to be able to, as artists, get past that suffering and bring some joy and playfulness into our lives. So if you're suffering from frustration as a creative process, maybe we can bring playfulness or something else to that. Yours might differ. This is just mine. But I just wanted to chat with you today, share that, because it was a real important moment for me. So I hope you enjoy. Take care. All the best.